Rhea sat by the window, her knees pulled close to her chest as raindrops traced trembling rivers down the glass. The sound of rain had always been her favorite, soft, rhythmic, soothing. But tonight, it only made the silence louder. Her apartment was dimly lit, the faint hum of the city outside muted by the storm. On the table beside her, a cup of tea had long gone cold, untouched since she poured it. It was meant to calm her nerves, but her nerves were beyond calming. She exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the glass for a moment before fading. The reflection that stared back at her looked distant, eyes rimmed red from sleeplessness, lips pressed into a thin line, hair tied loosely as if she had given up trying to make herself look put together. Inside her mind, thoughts were crowding, jostling for attention like an unruly mob. One thought led to another, until the whole thing spun like a carousel she couldn't get off. What if they hated my presentation? She muttered under her breath. What if I said something stupid? What if I lose this job? Her voice sounded small in the empty apartment, swallowed by the sound of rain. She had replayed yesterday's meeting at least 20 times in her mind. Every detail, the way her manager glanced at her slides, the pause before someone responded, the slight smirk on a colleague's face, was dissected, magnified, twisted into evidence that she had failed. She leaned back against the wall, staring up at the ceiling as though answers might fall from it. Her chest felt tight, her heart thudding at a rhythm she couldn't slow down. She tried to breathe deeply, but even her breathing felt forced. A drop of rain hit the sill outside, sharp and clear, and she flinched as if it were the sound of accusation. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, half hopeful, half afraid. A message from Arjun. Greater than, "Hey, want to grab coffee? You've been Mia lately." Her fingers hovered above the screen. Arjun was one of her closest friends, the kind who could make her laugh even on her worst days. But lately, she'd avoided him. Avoided everyone, really. The thought of conversation felt exhausting. The thought of pretending to be fine, impossible. She typed quickly. Greater than, can't today, too much work. Then she stared at the words and sighed. Her thumb hovered over the send button. She deleted the text. Typed again. Greater than, maybe tomorrow. Deleted again. Her thoughts began whispering. He's just being polite. You'll bring him down. He probably doesn't even want to see you. You'll ruin the mood. She pressed the power button and set the phone face down. The darkness of the screen was almost a relief. She rubbed her palms together, realizing they were clammy. Her shoulders felt like they carried invisible weights. She closed her eyes, but that only made it worse. Her mind had no mercy, it dragged her back to memories she didn't want to see. The moment her manager's eyes flickered during her presentation. The colleague who leaned over and whispered something while looking at her slide. The sound of faint laughter. Why can't I just stop thinking? She whispered. The clock ticked, steady and merciless. Each second that passed felt like a reminder of her inability to control her thoughts. She stood up, restless, pacing across the living room. The soft thud of her bare feet against the floor was the only sound besides the rain. She paused by the mirror near the door and looked at herself again. She didn't recognize that face. The spark that used to light up her eyes was gone, replaced by exhaustion and worry. Her reflection seemed to mock her. Look at you, falling apart over nothing. Everyone else handles stress, why can't you? She wanted to scream, but even that felt like too much effort. Instead, she sank down onto the couch and buried her face in her hands. Her thoughts had become her enemies, each one sharper than the last. They came in waves, past regrets, imagined future disasters, memories of mistakes she could never undo. She remembered the last time she laughed without overthinking it, months ago, maybe longer. Back when she could enjoy a moment without analyzing it to death. Now, even joy came with a side of guilt. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping insistently against the windows like 1,000 tiny fingers. She felt trapped inside her own head, like someone locked in a room where the walls kept closing in. Every attempt to calm down only made things worse. Stop thinking. Stop thinking. But the more she told herself that, the louder her thoughts became. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Arjun. She didn't look this time. She didn't want him to see her like this, curled up in the dark, drowning in thoughts that didn't even make sense. The kind of thoughts that looped endlessly, that made you feel crazy even when you knew they were irrational. She picked up her cold cup of tea and took a sip, grimacing at the bitterness. The taste reminded her how long she'd been sitting there, stuck in the same loop. Her eyes drifted to the wall clock. It was past midnight. She hadn't eaten dinner. Her laptop still lay open on the desk, glowing faintly with half-finished work. She walked over, closed it gently, and sat down beside it. The quiet hum of the machine fading away felt like a sigh. For a moment, she stared at the blank wall across from her. Her thoughts quieted, not because they were gone, but because she was too tired to keep up with them. She leaned back in her chair, whispering, "I wish I could just stop, just for 1 minute." Her eyes burned with tears she didn't mean to shed. The exhaustion wasn't just from overthinking, it was from fighting her own mind every single day. The rain softened outside, turning into a gentle drizzle. The city lights flickered faintly through the window, blurring into streaks of gold and silver. She closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to rest from herself. For a few fleeting seconds, the noise inside her head dimmed. And in that fragile silence, she realized something both terrifying and true: she wasn't just tired of the world. She was tired of herself. Of being trapped in a mind that never stopped speaking, never stopped fearing, never stopped imagining the worst. When she finally lay down on her bed, the ceiling seemed endless. Shadows shifted softly across it as lightning flashed far away. Her heartbeat slowed, but her mind didn't. It kept whispering in the dark, filling the quiet with its endless questions. What if tomorrow's the same? What if I never get better? What if this is just who I am? She turned onto her side, pulling the blanket close, tears drying against the pillow. Outside, the rain had stopped, but inside, the storm was far from over. Morning light crept softly through the thin curtains, painting long golden stripes across Ria's face. For a moment, she stayed still, half awake, listening to the faint hum of the city waking up outside: car horns, distant footsteps, a bird perched on the sill. The air smelled faintly of rain and wet earth, the kind of scent that carried both nostalgia and renewal. She blinked slowly, her mind already stirring, ready to begin its usual chatter. But before it could take over, she whispered to herself, "Not today." It was the smallest rebellion, barely a breath. But it was real. She sat up, feeling the coolness of the morning against her skin, and reached for her notebook on the nightstand. The pages were crumpled at the edges from being opened and closed too many times. She flipped to a blank page and wrote in uneven letters, "Greater than, I am not my thoughts. I am the one who watches them." Her therapist had said that line during one of their sessions months ago. At the time, Ria had rolled her eyes inwardly, thinking it was just another cliché. But lately, it had begun to mean something. Watching her thoughts, instead of fighting them, it sounded simple, yet impossibly hard. But she wanted to try. Her phone buzzed. A reflexive wave of anxiety hit her chest, but she exhaled slowly before reaching for it. Another message from Arjun. "Greater than, coffee today. You free?" For a moment, she just stared at the screen. The familiar voice of her mind stirred again. What if you say something awkward? What if you look tired? What if you're boring? What if he notices how messed up you've become? She smiled faintly. "You again," she murmured aloud, as if addressing a mischievous child. "You've had enough control." She typed back simply. "Greater than, yes. 4 p.m. Then she put the phone down and took a deep breath. The anxiety didn't vanish. It still lingered at the edges, but it felt softer, like a background noise instead of a scream. The day unfolded slowly. She made herself breakfast: scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee. Nothing special, but it felt like an act of care. She opened the window to let the fresh air in, and the cool breeze brushed against her face, carrying the faint sound of children laughing somewhere below. For once, she didn't rush to fill the silence with music or distractions. She just let it be. Around noon, she opened her laptop. The presentation from 2 days ago still haunted her, but instead of avoiding it, she looked at it again. Slide by slide. Her heart raced at first, waiting to find mistakes, waiting for proof that she had embarrassed herself, but the more she looked, the calmer she became. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't a disaster either. It was just work, just one moment among countless others. Maybe her manager's frown hadn't meant disappointment. Maybe the laughter she remembered wasn't about her at all. Maybe her mind had simply built its own version of events, fed by fear. She leaned back in her chair, resting her head, whispering, "You really fooled me, didn't you?" The thought didn't come from bitterness this time. It came with gentleness, even amusement. By the time the clock neared 4, she was dressed and ready, though part of her still hesitated at the door. She looked at herself in the mirror one last time, soft sweater, jeans, hair tied loosely. Not perfect, but real. The world outside was bright, washed clean by the rain. Puddles shimmered under the afternoon sun, reflecting fragments of sky. As she walked down the street, she caught her reflection in shop windows and realized how tense her posture had been all this time, shoulders raised, chest tight. She tried to loosen them. Every step felt like a quiet declaration, I am here. At the cafe, Arjun was already waiting by the window. He waved when he saw her, that familiar warm smile lighting up his face. She felt a sudden flutter in her chest, the old anxiety trying to push its way back in, whispering its usual lines. But she took a slow breath and smiled back. When she sat down, he said, "It's good to see you. I was starting to think you'd moved to another city or something." She laughed softly. "Just living inside my head for a while." He nodded knowingly. "Dangerous neighborhood, that one." They both laughed, and the sound surprised her. It felt genuine, unforced. The conversation flowed easily after that. They talked about work, about the storm last night, about the new cafe across the street. Sometimes her mind tried to drift. Did I talk too much? Did I sound weird? But each time, she caught herself. Watched the thought. Let it pass. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was pretending. She wasn't trying to be normal or fine. She was just being. When the waiter brought their coffee, she wrapped her hands around the cup, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers. The scent was rich, grounding. She stared at the rising steam and realized something profound. Her thoughts were still there, busy, messy, sometimes cruel, but they weren't running the show anymore. They were clouds passing through the sky of her mind, and she was the sky itself, vast, unbroken, constant. Arjun looked at her curiously. "You seem lighter today." She smiled. "Maybe I am." After they finished, they walked outside together. The sky was streaked with orange and pink, the air still fresh. They walked without talking much, just listening to the sounds of the world, the rush of cars, the laughter of strangers, the wind brushing through leaves. When they reached the corner where they had to part ways, Arjun turned to her. "You know, you don't have to hide when you're struggling. You can always talk to me." "I know," she said quietly. "I just needed to remember how to listen to myself first." He nodded, understanding. They said goodbye, and she watched him walk away, feeling an unfamiliar calm settle over her. The streets glowed under the sunset. She took the long way home, savoring the walk. With every step, she felt a little freer, not because her thoughts had stopped, but because she had stopped believing every one of them. When she got home, she opened her notebook again and wrote. "Greater than, today I watched my mind. It spoke, I listened, and I chose peace." She closed the notebook gently, turned off her phone, and sat by the window once more. The same place where she'd felt trapped just last night now looked different. The world hadn't changed, but she had. She rested her chin on her knees and watched the first stars appear in the sky. Her thoughts still murmured in the background, memories, worries, half-formed fears, but they no longer frightened her. They were just part of her, like waves in an ocean that would always move but never define the water beneath. For the first time in months, she felt still. Not empty, just quiet. And in that quiet, she realized what freedom truly meant. Not escaping her mind, but no longer being enslaved by it.